Okay, well, Luke, it's so great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, is this your first podcast or have you done these before?
I think I might have done like one a long time ago. So
Okay.
basically first. Yes.
Well, I'm excited to pick your brain about bees. I personally love bees. I've surprisingly never been stung by a bee. Fun fact. But I can't wait to dive into our conversation today. But before we get there, why don't you just introduce yourself and who you are to the listeners?
My name is Luke Howard and I run a company called the Bee Collective. And the Bee Collective's basically the Bee Collective's main mission is to plant pollinator habitat in the city of Columbus and provide education. And we do that in a variety of ways that I think we'll talk about today.
What started your interest in bees and how did this all come about for you?
So I actually was not a nature boy as a kid for the most
Okay.
part. I would say that I think I thought that nature was like a little icky. I was also super allergic to outside for the most part, mostly pollen and those kind of things. So for all those reasons, like as a kid, I stayed inside more than I was outside. Not that I didn't like it, but kind of avoided it. And what got me started was I was at Ohio State probably in my fourth major change at the time, having no idea what I wanted to do, sort of being like frustrated at that. And I guess was complaining a lot. And my girlfriend at the time heard all of those complaints and took it upon herself to find majors that would make me complain less and found the major that I chose, which is environmental economics at Ohio State with a specialization in sustainable agriculture. And
Okay.
that's when I learned how cool pollination was. And for my 20-year-old brain, that sort of shifted everything for me. And I was like, as someone that didn't really know what they wanted to do, was like, it feels like a pretty important topic that I could be pretty happy with spending the rest of my life studying and learning about pollination and everything that goes into that. And the first year out of college, I got my first beehive.
Cool. Okay. So quickly, you said that you were allergic. Did you just grow out of that as you came into adulthood?
I did, yeah, probably like right around that same time, like 21 or so, I just started growing less allergic. And like when we're talking about allergic, I was like, if you know the reference, like I was pretty much a bubble boy. Um,
Oh.
and like that level. And then all of a sudden it just started going away and I could take less and less medicine. And now I basically don't take anything. And it's just the occasional sniffle or something like that. So yeah, I just kind of grew out of it.
Okay, well that's really cool and meant to be. And I think it was meant to be that I found you. No pun in, well, pun intended, meant to be, huh? I was on my Discover page and your like a video that you were doing, I think it was close to Ohio State's campus. You were picking up a swarm of bees that you had found. And you were wearing a Sweeney's Tavern hat. And I was like, hey, that's a local bar. And then went to your page and I was like, oh, he is local. This is so super cool. So I really am excited to have you here. I want to know more about the Bee Collective. Do you have a location for where you're doing this? And I want to know more about your a day in a life of a beekeeper.
Yeah, my location is actually like 2 blocks away from Sweeney's Tavern.
Okay.
So that's why I was wearing the hat is it was like a gift from Sweeney himself because we're pretty much next door neighbors and I've sold them honey for cocktails and those kind of things.
Awesome.
And so yeah, my space is right next to like 400 West Rich and Land Grant and Cosi. It's all down there.
What is your main mission with what you're doing, I guess, and how to inform the public?
Yeah, so the true main mission is to convert vacant lots into prairie spaces. And then how do we go about doing that is kind of the goal. And through education is the mindset. And so that's why there kind of is two parts of the business, if you will. There is trying to convert vacant lot into prairie spaces is one part of it, but then providing the education to, I can only do so much as one person. So education is a way to help encourage and inspires others to do more,
Mm-hmm.
which is how we started putting art into beehives, which is why I've created a little bit of a platform for myself is that concept of working with artists, getting their stories, getting to share their stories, and then connecting that with beehives with the goal of merging nature and culture together,
Mm-hmm.
which is really like the underlying point of that too is going to school for environmental things, being a part of that concept and that movement of environmental stewardship. Within the environmental movement, there was like a ton of doom and gloom, like,
Mhm.
all these bad things are happening. We are destroying the planet.
Mhm.
Stop doing that, guilt tripping, all of those kind of things. And it really doesn't feel like it's helped a lot for the past 40 years, the doom and gloom movement. And so kind of my mission and philosophy of it is like, well, we're a society that is not really connected with nature. It is not a part of our culture. And so through art, we can blend nature and culture together to form something that makes people actually interested and engaged and curious about nature. And through that concept, we can potentially inspire more people to care through more positive messaging. And my always goal is through like a childlike sense of wonder to be like, oh yeah, what is that flower? What is this thing that you're doing? You're putting art inside of beehives. Like, that's interesting. I didn't know you could do that. And it's like, well, here's all these other things you didn't know you could do, but you can do, and it's pretty easy.
Absolutely. So for you personally, what does a typical day look like? We'll say right now, spring and summer. I know it probably shifts throughout the year of what you're doing, but what does a typical day look like for you in the bees?
For the most part, there is no typical day.
Okay.
That's kind of how I have it set up, which is necessary for me.
Uh-huh.
So there's part of it where it's keeping the bees, and I have 30 honeybee hives, and those are in 6 different locations around the city, where I have like 10 hives some places, 2 hives some places, 6 hive other places, and so tending to them. But that is a few times a week at most for a few hours a week. And then I do a lot of education. So, like later today, I'm going to Mid Ohio Food Collective to talk with them about some programming. I host events and bring people in to talk about bees and the environment as a whole. I create native bee boxes so that people can purchase and have native bees on their property. So that's a part where I build and make those as well. So there's a part of in the shop building boxes, there's a part of beekeeping, there's a part of tending to those properties that are pollinator spaces in the city of Columbus,
Mhm.
and creating the art side, putting the art inside of the beehives. And yes, you're right. Every season changes. So right now, a thing that takes up a ton of time is I help remove honeybee hives and other stinging insects from people's houses. And
Okay.
so I go to people's houses, remove them, and try to rehab those hives. So that takes up right now. And the other thing that takes up a ton of time right now is putting those art into beehives and creating the videos around it and the educational content around that concept. And then, yeah, like winter is entirely different. It's more art focused and creating the native bee box focus. So every season is very different. Every week is very different.
No, I love to hear it. So I don't think I told you this in our message on Instagram, but I have recently brought back Minimalist Moms. So this episode is going to be a part of Minimalist Moms. And I'm sure that there are moms listening and they're like, what does this have to do with minimalism? And maybe it doesn't specifically with minimalist living, but it does have to do with intentional living. And I think people hear that bees are so important, but they don't really know why. But we hear that all the time. And to me, I'm like, I want people to understand why it's important to be intentional about the way that we're treating these amazing creatures. So I'll let you answer that. Why do you think they are as important as we're constantly hearing?
Well, the first thing is like, I think it's funny because a big part of what I do is right planting native pollinator flowers and encouraging others to plant native pollinator flowers. And I would say in a vein, that's the opposite of minimalism because the environment is should not be minimalist. It should be biodiverse and rich.
Mm.
And where minimalist, maybe in that context, would be like monoculture, a single plant, like a farming system or something like that, where biodiversity is going to create tons of flower and tons of color and tons of chaos and beauty and wonderfulness. But on the other side of it, and the minimalist part is if you plant native pollinator plants, well, they are adapted to live in these areas. So to be a good native gardener, you plant it and basically forget about it. So it's the easiest way to garden if you're talking from a minimalist standpoint is, oh, you want a beautiful yard? Make sure you plant natives and plant them properly, and then you kind of can ignore them and just enjoy the beauty of them.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Keep going if you have more to say.
Well, we could get back to the question that you were asking, which is why bees are so important, which I think there are twofold, right? Like bees and pollinators in general there are bees, and when we think of bees, we mostly think of honeybees, and that is part human, just human nature, and part the society that we have created and the stories that have been built around the honeybees, because honeybees are a massively integral part to our food chain and our food system.
Mhm.
But honeybees are not native to the United States. They were brought over by the settlers, and they prop up our monoculture farming. And so there is our agricultural food systems, and that is in one bucket, and it is completely devoid from our ecosystems. So when we talk about like how important the bees are, honeybees in some ways, unfortunately, are completely integral to our food system and to having fruits and vegetables that you want on your dinner table. Even like alfalfa farming, which is mostly for feed for cattle and things like that, that is pollinated by bees as well. So it's not just your fruits and your vegetables, it's also if you eat meat, it's integral to their survival as well. And so that's sort of the agricultural system. Honeybees are vital to that process. And then for our native pollinators, that's caring about our ecosystem. And if we like flowers and if we like biodiversity and beauty that happens in nature, bees and butterflies and moths and flies and ants and all the other pollinators are the creatures that make all of that happen, right? They are the keystone species that allow us to have biodiversity and beautiful, rich areas, and not just like grasslands and all the plants, like a lot of trees that are wind pollinated. Anything that is not wind pollinated needs a pollinator to pollinate it, which is a lot of things that we like. And so without bees, you don't get those things.
Mhm. Absolutely. Just something off the top of my head. Oftentimes you'll see specifically little kids, but you see adults doing this too. They're running away when they see a bee. I guess why are we so fearful and how can we move through that?
I mean, I think that we're fearful because kind of I think it's a good thing with a Minimalist Mom podcast is because we teach kids to be fearful.
Mhm.
It's kind of that simple. Like it starts and it's a generational pass down thing because I do work with a lot of kids for education, and it's pretty easy to get them not fearful of bees. Just by hanging out and talking with them a little bit. A lot of fears that we have, right, are not inherently a part of a child's brain, but they are taught and learned lessons.
Mhm.
So someone long ago is fearful of a bee because they got stung once and it wasn't a fun experience. And then that is passed down either intentionally or unintentionally to the kids in that vein. So like I was just at a market and this kid was completely fearful of bees, and the dad was like, hey, we were booths right next to each other. And he's like, hey, can you talk to my kid about bees? And over the next like 2 hours, we just chatted about bees. I didn't really try to convince the kid of anything. We just kind of chatted and talked. And at the end, he was like, I love bees. I'm going to go home and pet bees and play with
Oh.
bees now. And like, again, I didn't try very hard. It was just talking with the kid about what I like to do, which is caring about bees. And it entirely shifted their mindset. And I think it comes from a place of like, yeah, you get stung once or something like that, and you're afraid of them, and you don't understand that any stinging insect is stinging for defensive reasons.
Mhm.
So, and a honeybee is one that we interact with a lot. So they are stinging because they feel like you are invading their space. So the biggest thing to do is just give bees their space because they are protecting, especially in the honeybee case, there's 50,000 bees per hive roughly, and they have a whole bunch of honey that they're protecting, and they have a whole bunch of larvae and their babies that they're protecting, and you have encroached their space in some way, shape, or form, whether you know it or not. And they are stinging because they are afraid of you,
Mhm.
and they're not stinging because they want to. Even more hated, wasps, it's the same thing. They are stinging because they feel like you have attacked them in some way versus like just going out of their way to sting you. But we kind of assume that why did that bee sting me? That just went out of my way to do something. And we also do that as well. We don't have a good identification between a wasp and a bee. And so everyone just calls everything bees usually. And so it's easy to give bees a bad rap because a yellow jacket stung you and you just saw a bright yellow and black flying insect, thought it was a bee, and it stung you, and you're like, oh, I hate bees now. But it wasn't even a bee that stung you. So there's like some disinformation, some passed down generational things that we share with our kids, and it all creates this like narrative that really isn't true at all and is pretty easy to dispel once you just choose to interact with it a little bit.
Absolutely. Weren't you telling me that there are 20,000 different types of bees?
Yes. So worldwide, there's 20,000 different species, roughly. Probably a lot more, but roughly that is what science says is that there are 20,000 species of bees. Essentially, one of those species is the honeybee, with eight main subspecies of honeybees worldwide.
Hmm.
So, and honeybees are not like any other bee for the most part. There are only a few species of bees and a few species of wasps worldwide that are social insects. So you have your social insects, those are the ones that live in the families, and honeybees are the largest, living in like 50,000 colonies. The only other insect that basically surpasses them are going to be ants in terms of colony size. The rest of the bees, the like pretty much 19,000 plus species of bees, are solitary bees. So
Okay.
they do not have big nests to protect. And that is why stinging insects get a bad rap for stinging, is because they have big nests to protect. So solitary bees, which is most of the bees, are single mothers that have very little protect. And if they do sting you, that is a last ditch effort because they are a single mom. And when a bee stings you, it dies. And if they sting you, then they are not there to take over to tend to their young. Where for a honeybee, there's 50,000 bees in a hive. If one stings you, there's 49,999 bees to take its place, right? So it's not as a big a deal to them to sting you. So there's sort of that. Honeybees give the rest of the bees a bad rap. Wasps give bees a bad rap, and none of it should really be happening. But we just don't know enough about the world of bees to be able to differentiate.
Sure. And like I said at the beginning, I've truly never been stung in my life, but I've always had this appreciation of, oh, you truly martyr yourself for your hive. I just have this high respect for bees because they are, my husband and I were talking about it before you and I chatted, of just the community. That's not the word I'm looking for. It is like a little society of sorts that they're maintaining and preserving. And it's like every bee has a certain job, like the worker bees, or the, what is it called? The ones that are basically just there to mate with the queen. The drones? Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, this is just a really cool representation of a well-oiled society that's at play here. And to me, I've always just had a lot of respect and I try to just move slowly around them. But yeah, I'm so glad that you dispelled some of those myths and just allowed people to, maybe if we had more insight and research, whether following someone like you or just seeking out resources on our own, sharing this with our kids, and they can continue to instill that in their kids. I just think it's a really cool thing and a worthwhile endeavor. Because this, again, going back to the honeybees and the importance of bees in our ecosystems, I think that if we had more of a reverence for them, we would take better care.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I like to work in urban spaces is like, right, my main location is across the street from Land Grant, one of the biggest breweries in the city. And there are what, probably roughly 500,000 honeybees on the other side of their building. And there's never any problems. There's a ton of people that come and watch me on the hill. And so I get to dispel those myths often times. And then I invite people on the hill to hang out with those 500,000 bees. And most people don't get to hang out around those many bees. And by the end of it, they're like, oh, these bees aren't so scary. Like I literally just hung out with them and nothing happened because I didn't poke the bear, if you will.
Yes, yes. Okay, I want to allow you to direct the rest of this conversation because, again, I am not super knowledgeable when it comes to what the audience should know and needs to know. So, again, we've talked about ecosystems, supporting native bees versus supporting honeybees. I guess where do you want to go next? What's important for listeners to know from this conversation?
The thing that comes to my mind, whether it's the best place to go next or not, but when you asked that, what popped into my head was just like a part that I really like, which is like, what can you do for environmental activism or what can you do for positive change? And I think in terms of caring about the bees, it's really easy. Just plant more flowers, but make those flowers native flowers.
Okay.
So I think that's really nice. Is just there's a really easy goal to do. It's just plant flowers and make those native. You don't have to do anything crazy. And I think of that in terms of like recycling and knowing what type of plastic you cannot recycle. Can you recycle this cardboard? All of that. And then then you go down the rabbit hole of the fact of like, oh, then how much of our recycling is actually being recycled? Or the paper straw movement, right? It's like, is this one single straw really helping the planet or not? And it's not really about whether that's good or bad. It's like the goal with bees is just plant more flowers.
Mm.
And with more flowers, you get more beautiful yard. Like it's pretty straightforward. And then within that, honeybees versus native bees, again, to go back to that when we're talking about flowers, is that honeybees foraging range is like a mile and a half, right? So where their one hive is, they have a mile and a half diameter to go around and pollinate if they want to. The native bee pollinating range or foraging range is 500 yards.
Okay.
So very different, which means if you convert like, a fifth of your yard to a native pollinator space and you see a whole bunch of native pollinators move in, those are your bees. Though you are helping those bees specifically. So if you watch your well manicured yard turn into a small native pollinator garden and you see bees move in, you are watching in real time the benefits of what you are actually doing for the planet. And so when it's talking about what can you do, I think to me, that's always a really cool thing is you can plant flowers, watch bees and butterflies move in and know, especially from a bee perspective, those are now your neighborhood flowers
Mm-hmm.
and neighborhood bee.
Yes, and mostly moms are listening to this show, and this is something that you could do with your children. Again, kind of taking some of the fear from it as well, and just doing those little steps. And it's kind of like when you introduce a new food. It's scary until you go to the grocery store or you plant it. Like even better, you plant the vegetable and then you try it together and you dice it up and you cook it together and you try it together. We're just saying like planting flowers together as a family, you can start to then see the benefit of all these little critters that are going to come enjoy the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like another thing, people are like, I have a lawn, I can't convert the whole thing to a prairie and my neighbors are not going to get mad at me or whatnot. And it's just like, you don't have to convert the whole thing. If you have like an acre of land or a half acre of land, convert a tenth of it to a pollinator space for a starter. It's like you just don't have to do the whole thing. And I feel like a lot of people, either through good intentions or excuses, like to be like, oh, I can't do this. And it's like, well, you just don't have to go 2 feet in, right? You don't have to jump into the deep end of it. You can just convert just a little space and see how that goes. So it's pretty easy to do. And then when talking about moms and stuff like that, like your podcast is about, clearly I am not a mom. I'm not even a dad, but I do care about like the childlike sense of wonder of it all, of seeing what's in your backyard and getting to see those things. And I think planting native and converting at least a small portion of your yard to native, it reminds me of like seeing your backyard from a child's perspective, where yes, planting native prairie grasses that are going to grow like and flowers that are going to go 2 to 3 feet tall. That's a cool little sneaky hangout place. That is a cool thing that like maybe adults were like, ooh, bugs and insects and all these kind of things. But for a lot of kids, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And there's a lot of curiosity that I can find within this in this space. And it changes from spring to summer to fall versus like a green lawn should say the same thing the entire time.
Mhm.
Then the other thing with that is like, well, a really good nesting place for bees is in logs, like old decaying logs. And so you have logs that are just out and about. Those are fun things for kids to play with. I always think too of like if you have a lawn and you have like a patch of dirt where no grass is growing, nothing is growing. Well, 70% of native bees nest in the ground and they need bare soil to nest in the ground. And so when thinking about a bee's perspective and a childlike perspective of a garden or of a lawn, and for an adult, seeing a bare patch of dirt is like an eyesore and you're super upset about it. But then from a kid's perspective, that patch of dirt might turn into mud during a rainstorm, and that's kind of fun to play in. And from a bee's perspective, that's actually habitat that's created there. And so shifting that perspective of like, oh, this is this eyesore in my lawn to, hey, this is actually creating life and a potential habitat for bees that are not going to sting you, and a potential playground for your kid. That it's just a shift in mindset out of sort of that typical adult mindset to a more childlike mindset, which is connected to more what nature actually wants to be.
Yeah, and again, another reason I wanted to talk to you is because several episodes that I've had on the show are about slowing down, going slow, mindfulness, the emphasis on all of that, to benefit not just mental health, but physical health and well-being, not just for ourselves, but for our kids. And to me, if I go out into our garden or onto our property, yeah, just sitting there and observing the ecosystems, kind of getting down on that level, it just makes me move slower and just I guess appreciate nature and the world differently than I would if I'm just constantly inside and not taking that time. But I guess that's just another call, not call to action, but in a sense, call to action for people to just like take time, go outside, rest and just observe the beauty around us. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's one of the fun things of having a platform where I'm supposed to make like posting videos and all that kind of stuff is
Yeah.
like it's really easy. Even though I plant a bunch of flowers, it's really easy to be caught up in like moving around and doing the next thing and running a small business and so on and so forth. But then sometimes I have to go record a video and find some bees. And the last video that I recorded about bees, I ended up having to sit with the flowers for like over an hour to capture just a few seconds of good footage because native bees move really, really fast. And I think it's like if you just walk past flowers, you see flowers, but unless, like you're saying, you slow down for a second and have your eyes slow down and hone in, you have that time to actually see all the activity and the commotion that is happening around the flowers. And so I would agree with you. It's like it's really nice to be able to sit down and actually see what's happening with the flowers.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. That's just a personal thing, like I said, to help me be more mindful. Plus, I love being in nature. I was the same as you. I was someone that, I mean, yeah, I got my outside time as a child. I wasn't allergic, but definitely into my teenagers, I did not want to go on hikes. I did not want to be outside. So, rediscovering it, probably with my children in adulthood, nature in general has been a gift in a sense. And again, it's a way that I slow down and appreciate something that's greater than us that will probably, well, I don't want to say outlive us. Well, will outlive us. We could talk about climate change and how that affects bees, but I think that might be a conversation for another day. Did you have anything else that you wanted to encourage listeners with, or was there anything else that you wanted to hone in on that we didn't hit?
I mean, there's like you said, there's so much. There's definitely like all the talks about the art going into beehives because that's again something that I do with a bunch of artists from around the country and around the world. But it's also the point is to also inspire anyone to do anything with art and nature. And there's a big quote that I love from Wes Jackson where it's just all about that is becoming an artist with nature. And that is not doing exactly what I do of working with artists, collaborating for this big art project, and getting sculptures and being in the art space world. It's like seeing your backyard as a place for art. And that's as simple as like dyeing with flowers or plant lions or so on and so forth. Just like the, again, seeing your backyard through a childlike sense of wonder and creating more art in your backyard. Again, that's having a garden. It's not, again, this big like concept of, not big concept, but sort of that sort of bougier side of art or like stuck up side of, oh, it has to be art. It's like, it's more just flowers are art and a garden is art. And
Yeah.
you can make cool little native habitats with bees that are also a child playground. And that is art. Just seeing your backyard through art from an art perspective and through a child's eyes. I know we've already talked on it, but that is like kind of another main mission with the art concept that I do is like, yeah, this is what I do, but it's really just to be like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Now, how could I play?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess another thing within that is that I think because I get this pushback when I talk about converting your lawn to native pollinator habitat and you're like inviting bees in. And then I have parents just be like, okay, but if we're inviting more bees in and my child wants to walk around barefoot in the lawn, are
Mhm.
they going to get stung by bees? And I'm like, they might get stung by bees, but I don't know. And this is a kind of a question for you in terms of like, would as a parent, because again, I'm not a parent, but for the question for you would be like, if you have a manicured lawn, that means you're probably putting down fertilizer and pesticide or herbicide in your lawn to make it manicured. And then you have this big playground for your children, like run and play in there with no bees or anything in sight. or if you had a native lawn where you were then not using pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers, it's like what's worse on your child's feet, getting stung by a bee every once in a while, or absorbing the fertilizers and herbicides and pesticides into their feet every time they run. It feels like I'd rather take the sting, but also I'm not a parent.
No, I totally agree with you, but I'm also probably not the best person to ask because I'm kind of a like tough love you can endure. You can be really purist about it. But I think with this episode, like I said, well, one, I'm just super interested in bees. My husband wants to get into beekeeping here at some point because we just moved out and we have some acreage now in Granville. But yeah, I just wanted to use it as encouragement to say, like, do not fear. These creatures are amazing. Here's someone with some answers and tuning into you and what you're doing in the space of the Bee Collective and online. But I think this is all just very interesting as well.
Well, you're curious about bees and the space. Do you have more questions about things that I could fill you in on about bees, like that you've had?
Well, okay, so I told you just a month ago, I stumbled upon a swarm of bees in our woods, and I had messaged you and was like, I can't even remember my question, what it was, but it was like, where did these come from? How long are they going to be here? So, why do we see those swarms maybe on our property, and what do we do if that ends up happening?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because we are about to end swarm season.
Mhm.
So swarm season happens every year from April till June for the most part, late April till June. And that is honeybees' natural life cycle. Right? So honeybees are cavity nesting bees. And whether that is your typical hive like I have, the Langstroth hives, or inside of a tree or wherever they happen to choose, they are looking for a cavity, kind of roughly like a 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot space that they can move into. And their goal is to get to fill that entire space. They're kind of like water in that way of just fill the whole space up. And when they get claustrophobic, if you will, then they choose to split in half or split into thirds. And so that mother hive is going to stay in that cavity, and then they are going to raise a new queen, and then they are going to take a queen and like again a third or half of the hive and start an entirely new hive, and that's what we call swarming. So it's part of their way to like propagate and start new hives and encourage their growth and biodiversity of their own species, if you will. And they swarm every spring. As long as they're a healthy hive, they pretty much swarm every spring because they fill that cavity and they have to start a new colony instead of all moving colony. And so those bees swarm. So like think one queen and like 10,000 bees swarm out of that hive and are in search of a new place. And during that time, during swarm season, they leave that hive to give that hive its chance to thrive again. And then they look for a temporary location. So that's going to be like on a tree or on a side of a house or a fence post or something. And so you'll see these massive clusters of bees gathering, and they are there temporarily. This is a scouting mission. So they hang out there, they send out a bunch of scout bees to find a new location to move into. And once they decide a location to move into, they will all leave and find permanent residence in that new place. So that's probably what you were stumbling on was something happened to that swarm of bees, but they were leaving the mother hive and in search of a new hive. And it happens every spring. And I get calls all the time like, hey, there's 1,000 bees or 10,000 bees that have just showed up to my house. What do I do? And on one side, you can just let them be because they're going to be there for a day, a few hours, 2 days, whatever it takes for them to find a new location. But also, they are looking for permanent residence. And so sometimes when you stumble upon a swarm of bees, that permanent residence, it's one of the jobs that I was talking to you that I have right now, is inside of your soffit, inside of a hole in your wall, inside of some sort of cavity that could be your house. And so I don't recommend people, especially in urban areas, to just let the honeybees swarm and do their thing. I recommend calling a beekeeper like myself, but there's tons of others. They can come and collect them so that we can kind of help not have honeybees be a nuisance to people and move into their house. It's like we can capture them as swarm and put them back in a location where they are maintained and controlled.
That's so informative. And I mean, again, I feel like I wanted to just make sure that we touched on the ecosystem, preserving this, the why behind it. Again, there's so much more depth I think that we could go into and what your Instagram account is doing as well. Like you said, you've created quite a bit of a following there with your videos. They're very informative. But do you have a final last word that you want to leave with the listeners before we wrap up?
Oh, I don't know.
If
uh,
not, that's okay too. You've given us so much to think about. It doesn't have to be profound.
yeah, I mean, I just think that we've covered like a lot of the topics. So anything that I can think right now is just kind of a regurgitation of what we've already said. I've said my big buzzword type of thing. So that's why, other than like going into other topics of like what we do and why and all those kind of things, we've
Mhm.
covered any like last messages that I would be leaving people with.
No, you're great. Well, where can listeners find you online and connect with you if they are local?
All of my accounts are under the Bee Collective. So that's where you can find me. That's my website. That's on social media, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. That's where I'm mostly at right now. Also Facebook. And so anything called the Bee Collective, you can find me. The Becoming Home event is in October. And that is where you actually get to see the art that went into the hives come out. And it's sculptures made by artists that the honeybees have built sculptures on top of. And that'll be in October. And there's like free and paid for events around that. So that's the big thing coming up. And we do foraging classes and honeybee classes throughout the summer too that are adult friendly and kid friendly. So you can come out and enjoy some food and hang out with the bees and learn more if you want to take those classes, and you can find those again through social media.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check the thing out in October. That sounds amazing. And I guess I should have asked you my last question for you. I should have asked, do you have hope that people are changing, I guess, gaining more insight about why this is so important to preserve these ecosystems? Like, do you have hope that we are changing as a society, or are you, like you said, it was kind of more of like a fear tactic there for a while?
Tepid hope, I guess. Like I see a lot of positives. There's a lot of I'm not the only large bee account, so I think that's great. There's a lot of people that love the bees, and I think kind of frustratingly, there's a ton of comments of people being like, more people should think this is cool. But then when you read the 4,000 comments on some of my videos, it's like everyone's saying it's cool, and people being like, more people should say it's cool. So maybe a lot of people are still not getting it, but I feel like a lot more people are getting it than they're not.
Mhm.
But then there's the side of it where, again, still as a society, we are so focused on the honeybee, and that is one species of 20,000 species. And those are not native to the United States. They're really cool because they produce honey and they help with our agriculture. But when we talk about save the bees and bees, there's so many other more bees that are worth saving and valuing. So while I think we've done a better job of getting people informed that bees are super important, when we say bees, we're still almost exclusively talking about the honeybee. And that's a really big disservice to our ecosystem and our environment and the other native bee species that are out there that actually need support because they don't have beekeepers and entire industry behind them to support them. They are just dying because of lack of habitat and pesticide use.
Yes. You said for parents listening or for anyone listening, to, like a quick, easy thing to do, a step in the right direction would be to plant flowers. Another one might be to consider stopping using fertilizer. What's something more natural they could use on their plants or on their grass?
If you plant native flowers, you don't need anything for them. So like that's one thing that we are completely also separate of. Like our urban environments and our agriculture system are completely separate from the environment. So we get stuck in sort of that type of question of like, what can you do for your grass that aren't that? It's like, well, grasses are non-native too. So they need fertilizers and pesticides. They need the stuff that we think they need. And I think we get stuck in that mindset as humans of like, oh, we have to do something to protect the environment. And it's like, if it's done right, no, you don't. Like it can take care of itself. It's all these systems that are completely separate from our ecosystem or our native ecosystem that need human intervention to make sure it's happening.
Mhm.
Honeybees being one of those things. So it's like when you start doing more natural and native things, you realize as a human, you don't have to do as much. And I think that's a really nice but humbling message is like, if you're doing it right, you as a human become more of a keeper, just a watchful eye. someone that is checking on things versus integral to the system. And I think as humans, we want to be integral, and it feels like we need to like humble ourselves sometimes to be less integral into the system. And it's like, yeah, again, if you set it up right, you just get to sit back and watch. But
No.
within that, I think another thing to kind of hit home that point is like that has been starting to make the rounds on social media is grass seed mixes back in the day before big fertilizer came out
Mhm.
had clover in the seed mixes. White clover, again, not a native species, but it had clover in the seed mixes. Do you know why they had clover in the seed mixes?
No, why?
Because clover is a nitrogen fixer into the soil. So that was back in the day before we had a whole entire fertilizer industry. That is what the grass companies put into the grass. So you had intentional clover planted into your grass so that you could fix nitrogen in the soil to feed your grass and to make it healthy.
Oh,
So those are like the little things that have changed over time as humans that we just don't realize. We had a natural way to add fertilizer to the gardens, and then we decided let's get rid of the clover in general and use fertilizers when really it didn't used to be that way and it doesn't need to be that way. So that kind of comes back to your answer, and again is kind of that shift of like why we think we need to add all this stuff to it when we really don't. And everything is connected. So when you talk about, when I assume your minimalist mom stuff, it's like the same thing happened with our food industry, right? It's like cooking good and healthy food versus preservatives and pesticides and pre-made meals and all this kind of stuff. It's like there's a
yeah.
lot of similarities of like, oh, wait, you're saying back in the day we just put clover into the grass intentionally as a fertilizer, and now you have to pay for fertilizer when it was built into the grass beforehand, and that's why it was there. It wasn't accidental,
Yeah.
sort of those things. And I'm sure you could make a lot of similarities between mom life stuff that is the same type of vein of things in marketing systems that and non-minimalistic things that we do now that seem normal, but they're really not normal and pretty new thoughts.
Sure, yeah. I just got off an interview with Benji Balmer of Yellowbird Food Shed, and we were talking a lot about that when it comes to the food. So I thought these were two great episodes that can compare some ideas and like-mindedness together. And by the way, I'll make sure that I go back and make this flow a little bit better so that this stuff isn't here at the end. But as we wrap up, just two rapid fire questions I have for you here at the end that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what has been a beneficial resource in your life that you want to leave with the listeners?
Beneficial resource. My favorite person in this space is Wes Jackson.
Wes Jackson.
So he's a really important scientist out of Kansas that works on perennial wheat crops and is doing some really cool stuff. So that's where I get a lot of inspiration from. But also, like, one of those things is like the Xerxes Society and other environmental orgs. I think there's also like a disconnection between just there are a lot of people doing great things out in the world, and we don't always hear about them. So things like the Xerxes Society, they have pollinator lists and they have seed mixes that you can buy. And there's a lot of resources like that where you can go and buy your overly complex thing of like planting native flowers. So those are two things that I feel like I'm not answering the question super well.
No,
But I did
great.
want to say one of my favorite things. So when we talk about, I say, plant more flowers, but those flowers should be native.
Yeah.
Well, you cannot go to Lowe's, you can't go to Home Depot, you can't go to any garden center in this area to get your native flowers. You have to go to native nurseries. So, one of my, as a true resource type of thing, what I love to do is, have you ever been to Marengo, Ohio?
Are you talking about? I know what you're talking about. What is that? It's like a hippie. What's it called? I haven't been, but I know what you're
Well,
talking about. Ruby plants.
I'm not talking about that, but
Oh,
yes,
okay.
you're talking Ruby Plant Ranch, right?
Yes, yes. But I have been to Marengo. What else is there?
Well, so that's where, when you're talking about kids and when you're talking about resources and you're talking about planting native flowers. So my favorite, probably one of the more established native nurseries is called Natives in Harmony, which is
Okay.
technically in Harmony, Ohio, but it's right next to Marengo.
Okay.
And so as a weekend activity, there is Natives in Harmony where you can get all your native plants and you don't have to come knowing them. They can help teach you like, what do you have? What do you need? And you get really good homegrown Ohio starter native plants. from there. So that's Natives in Harmony. And then there is Groovy Plant Ranch, which is more of like your destination, but that's all your house plants. And those are, again,
Oh,
non-native species, but plants are still cool.
yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole experience and people know it. And then there's Hoof Hearted Brewery right there too. So in like a 5 mile drive, you have a brewery with food and walking areas. It's got a cool forest in the background. So it is like family friendly. And then there's Groovy Plant Ranch and then your natives. So it just makes getting your natives easier and it kind of makes getting native plants as a first time. Like you can, even though you got to drive to Marengo, which is 40 minutes from me, you can make it a whole Saturday like experience. And I think that's helpful like for families and stuff. It's not just drive out to this native plant to get a bunch of stuff and come back. It's like there's 3 places you can go to that are family friendly and pretty big that I like. So I wish everyone took that. That was a top Columbus Saturday afternoon
Oh.
experience is go to those 3 places.
Oh no, I love that. I don't think anyone's ever answered the resource question that well. You gave us quite a bit to think about and to do. So I love that answer. But my last question for you, and then I'll let you go, is what is something that you can't stop talking about? And I'm not going to let you say bees. You can't say bees.
Okay, just anything that I
Anything,
talk about.
we just want to get to know you better.
Can't stop talking about a lot of stuff, but what is something on my mind right now? Oh gosh, I really don't know what I want to answer that with. What is something you can't stop talking about as I
No,
think about it?
I was thinking about it as you were thinking about it. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about if you want to get real deep, I've been thinking about a lot about identity and being the same person that I say that I am and like on a public platform that I am in real life. Being consistent with different elements of my identity and not chameleoning, which I don't think that I do. I think I'm pretty good about that, but just really maintaining a consistency. So I've been thinking about that a lot, honestly.
Nice. Yeah, that is
Your
that
answer
is
doesn't
like
have to be
always a
that deep. I'm just sharing that with you.
yeah. No, but it is a tricky one when we have platforms and stuff like what are you trying to do and say and we're not becoming caricature of yourself for sure. I think that's really interesting.
What do you talk about? What if you went and got a drink with your friend, what would you talk about? Do
Just like dumb stuff. I don't know. Like I
you like
think
it's summer here in Columbus? Like what are you doing?
I mean we're doing a lot of kayaking trips and camping trips outside. So obviously talk about that a lot. Obviously, like the current state of things is a large topic of things to talk about.
Okay. Like
And
politics and stuff. We probably should stay away from that.
of course, that's why I'm like, oh yeah, that's not a fun kind of
Yeah.
topic. Yeah, it's just so much of my life right now is wrapped around like bees and nature and when's the next kayaking trip and let's
I
listen to
love it.
some music. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
that
I was
answers
just
it.
like talking to my friends about a surprise concert later,
Yeah,
but
I think you answered it. I think that's great. I mean, it's just again to get to know you better. And I like that you're struggling a little bit. I like that you're taking it seriously. I appreciate the respect of the question, but I think in general, I think you answered it.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me look.
Yeah, no, you're great. Well,
I
thank
can't
you.
wait for 30
Oh,
minutes from now to be like, that's the answer I wanted to say.
oh, that's so funny. Well, if you end up wanting to shoot that message to me, you can, and I'll put it in the introduction of the episode. But Luke, you have given us so much to think about. Again, I'll include everything you talked about in the show notes of the episode as resources. Again, your Instagram account, I'll link. It's a great resource for people that are curious and want to start diving deeper into the world of bees because it's so much vaster. That's not a word, but it's much bigger than I think we all believe it to be. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.